Hey everyone, welcome back to Chasing Success podcast. This is a special episode because we have Kasey Tench here. And so, Kasey, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for being here.
Hey, Zach. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so I'm excited to talk to you because I kind of followed your journey. We've known each other for a little while, but I followed your journey and your recent transition. So I wanted to get you on the podcast and talk about that. But before we go into that, can you kind of tell people who you are and what you do?
Of course. So I'm Kasey. I worked in public education for a decade as a life skills teacher. The name was Family Consumer Sciences. That fell under the umbrella of the career and technical education classes. So one of the classes that weren't core, but, I'm a little partial, so I think it was one of the most fun classes to take. But after a decade in education, I decided that I wanted to transition into this coaching space. I am now a holistic life coach and mentor, holistic, because I found healing in holistic medicine and just different holistic ways of living. And so that's what I want to share with everybody that I work with and everybody that's willing to listen to me. I have been diagnosed with a number of different chronic illnesses. And so it was through the healing of my own body that I learned and found that we actually do have the power to heal ourselves. And so I feel really passionate about this space and I'm stoked to be in it.
Yeah. So one of the questions that I have is because I've seen the word holistic come up a lot. So can you just tell people what that actually means or what it means specifically for you?
For me, holistic health is viewing a person, your body, your mind, your life, from a more whole standpoint, the whole body, the whole mind, the whole person, taking into account your life experiences, taking into account your thought process and your emotions and how everything is all tied into one. I mentioned I had been diagnosed with a number of chronic illnesses and I navigated through Western medicine. I had different doctor's appointments that, what you would think of a typical doctor's appointment. And there's different specialists who would look at one thing. Endometriosis was one of my diagnoses. And so whenever my female reproductive system was being addressed, nothing else was. Different traumas were not thought about and how they played into the manifestation of this illness. And so holistic health is taking into account all different aspects of what could have created this and getting to the root of it. That's what I like to say in my sessions. We get to the root of where this belief or where this pain came from. And when you get to the root of something, you can pull it out from its very source. Also just using different naturopathic and naturalistic remedies. I love playing around with different herbs and plant medicine, and just focusing on how you can support your body naturally without use of substances.
Yeah. And so, and you might not know this answer, but again, all these questions are mainly like how you think about these things. But why do you think that, like you mentioned Western civilization and Western medicines, why do you think that, because I've heard like good and bad things about holistic medicine. Why do you think that there's a stigma, or do you think there is a stigma to holistic medicine?
Absolutely. Absolutely. A lot. I know just in my own personal experience, whenever I was incredibly ill and I just stopped going to my doctor's appointments and I told all my family members and my friends, I'm not doing that anymore. I'm not taking that medicine. I'm not going to see that doctor. And everybody was like, Kasey, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? You need to. And I was like, no, I don't. Can I cuss on here?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, because I almost just said, fuck that. But
we are all good.
Okay. But I was like, with every appointment I go to, I feel like I am not being heard. I am not being listened to. And I'm getting a different prescription medication every time, feeling the side effects of it. And I'm getting sicker. And so for me, I was like, I'm not going there anymore. I'm not getting better. I'm going to try something different. And again, everyone thought I was crazy for doing my own thing, researching different herbs, finding how to heal through plants. That was it was something that no one had ever heard before. And so they thought I had completely lost it. I mean, to a certain extent, I really had, because I was so fed up. I was willing to try the things that there are stigmas surrounding, because, you know, why not? Nothing else is working. Why not try this? So there's definitely a stigma. People think that, I don't know, it's all a sham, or voodoo or hoodoo is hippy dippy. Like everybody has their own view of it, and that's okay. They can have that view, but I know that it's worked for me. I know that my body is healing. I know that the different chronic diagnoses that I've received are in remission from holistic healing.
Awesome.
So, of course, there are stigmas, and of course, there are people who don't understand my mission, but that's okay, because I stand strong in it.
Yeah, and since this kind of is a business podcast too, I mean, that's something to call out too, because who you're speaking to and who you're planning on working with would be called your ideal customer profile, or your
Right.
ICP. And so, like, the people that you're talking to and the people that you're resonating with are the people that you want to work with. You know, you're not gonna have a vegan and try to take them to a steakhouse, right? You know what I'm saying? So, but I think this is a perfect segue for the name of the company. So you mentioned like plants and all that kind of stuff, and you've also gone through this, but can you tell people the name of the company and then why you chose that?
Yes. So the name of my business is Rooting for You. And I just, again, I know I'm partial, but I think it's so just beautiful, because in my coaching sessions, I want my clients to know that I am rooting for them. So it is a play on words in that aspect, but also getting to the root cause. What is the root reason that you're feeling stuck or stagnant in your life? What is the root cause that you're struggling in your relationships, that you can't seem to communicate with those that you love? What is the root cause that you feel so self-conscious and showing up for yourself, and you don't feel strong enough to use the boundaries? When did that begin? That's the root of that. And then also, when you plant new seeds, you grow new roots. And so it is all this, again, very naturalistic, within alignment of Mother Nature. We uproot what's there that's not working, and we plant new seeds to grow new roots and create a new foundation, so my clients can build a life that they're really proud of.
Yeah, and I know that you have a course or a coaching program. Like, can you kind of walk us through, you can keep it high level, but like, what do your clients experience whenever they're working with you?
So I have, the signature program is an 8-week intensive coaching program. And so we meet weekly for an hour for 8 weeks. And the structure is within alignment of the seasons. And so our first session, I give my clients the choice to begin with either spring or winter. I work with women, and so the seasons are within alignment of our menstrual cycle. And I ask my clients, you know, when is your next cycle date? And we begin within alignment of her cycle. And so we can begin with the menstrual cycle, or we can begin directly after, which I call inner spring. You know, when we think about the seasons in Mother Nature, we often, everything starts new. It is fresh in spring. We're coming out of winter, and in the spring, you know, the sun is coming back, and we begin thinking, oh, what are we going to do with this spring in the air? What are we going to do with summer? You know, to a certain aspect, spring is our new year in society. And with women, it can feel that way as well. Our menstrual cycle, however, the first day of the bleed is actually the first day of the cycle. And so that's why I allow women to choose which one do we want to begin with. But either way, my sessions are broken up into each season. And so we will begin with winter or spring. But in spring, we plant new seeds. Why are you working with a life coach? What are the things? What are the habits? What is the purpose here? What do you want to get out of this? And we lay it all on the table. And that is what builds the foundation for the rest of the program. Summer is the time for development and cultivation. We nourish the new seeds that have been planted, and also we go picking weeds. Do you do much in the garden or in your yard, Zach?
I don't, but I build my business, and I kind of look at it as seeds.
Yes.
And you have to plant that seed. You like what you start with isn't always what you get at the end, but like you're continuously building, and I work on like continuous improvement. So like just a quick segue, like I started with life coaching at IMEO, then I went to business coaching, and now we focus on OKR programs. So it's kind of like that. Like the seed was life coaching, then it grew into business coaching, and now it's blossomed into OKR programs. So I don't do much gardening, but I can resonate a little bit.
That's so beautiful, because that's exactly it. But so when we go picking weeds are the things that grow in your life that you did not plant. Weeds could be planted by society, could be planted by your parents, could be planted by, old habits that you partook in your younger years. But we pluck those, we pull them out. They're not really serving you or your garden, your life. So we pluck the weeds. And then in the fall, my big question for fall is, what leaves do you want to shed? What habits do you want to shed? This could be self-sabotaging habits. This could be relationships that are no longer serving you. This could be places, careers, anything in your life that feels restrictive and you're ready to let go. That's processed in the fall. And then winter is the decay of it all. And again, winter is within alignment of the menstrual cycle. And so we can end with that because it is a heavier session. But for the clients who come in and they're like, I'm tired of this. Like, I'm fed up of what's happening. I'm ready to move on. Then they have the opportunity to begin with their menstrual cycle. And so in that first session, we release and let go whatever it is that you don't want anymore in your life. And so then the very next session is the planting seeds and cultivating and all of that. So we run through that structure twice, and at the very end, I call that my client's rebirth. Rebirth is one of the things that I promote in my client sessions. My roadmap is called the Rebirth Roadmap. It's essentially a guidebook to your rebirth. I feel like I have experienced a massive rebirth. I am no longer the woman I was. While she is still a part of me, I have transformed. And I know what it took for me to get to this point. And so I developed that roadmap, that guidebook, because I certainly floundered around for quite some time trying to figure it out. And I would have given anything for just a guidebook on how to make it through. And so that's what I've created, and that's what I offer in this 8-week intensive session.
And it's I like that you have created this from your own experience, because I think that's why we're so passionate about what we do. It's not just because we want to help people. Like, yes, that's a great thing, but it's also because we know what they're going through. Yeah. So it's not like we're just trying to make money. I mean, yes, that's going to be helpful because we can keep the business going, but it's because we actually care about what we do and how it impacts the people that we work with. So that was awesome. My question for you is, did you come up with that metaphor, or did you like pull it from somewhere?
So this past January, I was in the seed planting phase of my business. I knew this was something that I was creating, but I didn't have the names or I didn't have all that figured out yet. But I was in my own personal funk. I was experiencing grief. And it was a hard time for me. And I was on the phone with one of my friends, and I was like, I'm trying to build a business, but my life also is very shitty right now. I was crying. I was like, what's happening? And she was like, Kasey, you are being reborn. That's why you're crying. Babies cry when they're born. And I was like, oh, it was light bulbs.
Epiphany.
And I was like, this is a rebirth. And that was the vocabulary that I was looking for, but couldn't really get to it. And I was like, that's it. That is what I want to help people with, is because this space has been wildly uncomfortable for me. I named it the Rebirth Roadmap so that I could then create that structure so other people could walk through those spaces in their life with support. Because while I had support systems, I didn't have a pro in it. I didn't have a person who had walked through those different pains and those different struggles and the different traumas that I had. And so it was like I had support to some extent, but not a level that would have really benefited me. And like you said, we've been through it, and that's what I want to do. I want that woman who is struggling and who is in pain to see somebody else has been through it. Not only did they go through it, they created something to help you move through it with more ease.
Yeah. And as like an entrepreneur myself, it's like, there's a couple people that I follow that kind of help guide me, and then also have mentors and coaches myself. And to hear that, I don't get excited to hear that they have struggled too, but like to understand that like it's not sunshines and roses all the time. I mean, I'm looking around my room because I have Steve Jobs and Einstein and Kennedy all around me. So like all these great figures, and all we really hear about is the success. We don't hear about the journey. So it's really awesome that you're focusing in on that. First, you're finding the root cause, then you're helping people rebirth. And I think that's something like we've both experienced. We were talking about this before we hit the record button. We're both different people than what we were 10 years ago. And so like to rebirth, it almost gives somebody permission to be something different. And that's something that I've experienced. I was going to ask you, have you experienced this? Because I know that you have, or I think you have a close group of friends around you, and we used to kind of party and all that kind of stuff together here and there. But we're totally different people. Like we're focused on building our businesses. We aren't partying like that anymore. And I know that some of my friends have had to see that, and I had to remind them like, hey, I'm not that person anymore. So I'm going to say no to hanging out sometimes because I'm working on this, or I'm not going to do what I did before because I'm not that same person. Have you had to navigate that, or have you had any issues with certain friends, or have you had to cut people out?
It has been uncomfortable for sure growing into this new space. I like to call it growing pains. I don't know if you had any growing pains when you were little, but I remember my legs just like aching, and my mom said it's growing pains, and that's what I feel like this process has been like, to rebirth and to be reborn and to no longer be the person that you used to be. There are pains because it's uncomfortable for us to find who we are. Who is this new person? I want to be a new person, but who is it? What do they like to do? What are their habits? And so, finding out all those things, but then everyone in our life has to meet this new person too, and to get accustomed to this new person. And certainly there are relationships that I no longer entertain, because I'm not drinking every day, a lot every day. I'm not doing that. Yeah. And so if there was anyone in my life who still wanted to party and rage, that's no longer fitting into my schedule. It's no longer important to me. And there are different relationships that really fell back, but then for the most part, my friends and my family, they encourage this growth. They are able to see, okay, well, she's healthy now. Her body is not in constant pain. Her mind is not in constant turmoil. And so they have really supported me through this growth. And, the ones who support me are still here, and the ones who my growth, it wasn't convenient for them, we don't talk anymore. And it's a little bit of both.
I'm assuming that you've probably experienced grief from losing those people, but on the other end, you've received much more reward. How do you balance that? Or is that something that you're still processing?
Oh, that is a very good question, because grief is something that's intertwined within my coaching structure. Grief is the winter season, and experiencing that. And so I feel like I have come to this space to know grief as love. It's the flip side of love is how I have been able to sit with it a little bit more easily. Because, grief is a hard thing to sit with. But calling it the other side of love, to grieve something just means how deeply I loved that person, place, thing. And that has helped me move through it with more ease, but also crowding out with joy. I have had to learn what I like to do, because my old habits consisted of just partying. Like, I didn't have hobbies. My hobby was the party girl.
Yeah.
So when I didn't drink anymore, I was like, okay, so what do I do? Like, this past weekend, my girlfriends said, let's go to a tailgate. And I was like, I don't want to go to a tailgate. What would I do? And, and they were like, Kasey, you can go to tailgates and not drink. And I was like, really? Like, I don't know this. I don't know.
Yeah.
And so I've had to learn, what do I enjoy? I figured out I love gardening. I love getting in the garden. I love getting my hands in some dirt. Planting different plants. Like, that is something that I love to do. And just finding those things that bring me little pockets of joy. That has helped with navigating the different pains of feeling the grief of shedding that old version, that old layer of me.
Yeah. That reminds me. So I just finished a book called Tiny Habits. Have you heard of it?
I have, but I haven't read it.
Oh, you should read it, because what you're explaining, or at least how it resonates with me, is you're taking a bad habit that you had and you're replacing it with a good habit. And so the formula that he talks about is behavior equals motivation plus ability plus prompt. And so a lot of people will focus on motivation, and then they'll forget about ability, or they'll forget about the prompt, or they'll try to start a new habit from scratch. But what it sounds like you've done is you've kind of taken whatever prompt it would have been that triggered for you to go drinking or go partying and that kind of stuff, and you've replaced it with gardening. And so, like, that's what it reminds me of. And then to circle back around, my question is like, do you experience change better whenever it's big or whenever it's tiny?
Can you reframe that question?
Yeah. So like in the Tiny Habits book, what they're talking about is, if you really want to create a habit and form something new in your life, you have to break it down where it's simple and you have the ability to do it. You can have the motivation to do it and things like that. So the question is, like, do you think it's better to go all in and try to change like these huge amounts of things, or break it down like one tiny habit at a time?
Okay, so I can tell you, Tiny Habits is more digestible. It's less intimidating, I think, when you want to begin something new with Tiny Habits. If you can just do a couple minutes of this every day, then you'll build it. And so I believe that is more long lasting. That is more sustainable. Me personally, my personality, I have always been just balls to the wall. So, like, when I decide I want to change something, that's that. I am all into this new thing. There's no tiny habits about it. I'm all in. And so I have experience with both. With my morning routine, I would say that began with tiny habits. I didn't go all into waking up early and and meditating. I I like to tap every morning, the EFT tapping. I do that in the mornings. And so my morning routine has been built in tiny habits, piece by piece, and things like that. But for the larger, like, habits in my life, I just jumped on in. I was like, I'm done with that. On to the new.
So speaking of that, that's a perfect segue into, because you mentioned before you're a former public educator and now you're a holistic coach. So speaking of going balls to the wall, how did you take that approach and go from a public educator to a holistic coach?
Okay, so I had all intentions this time last year. I had all intentions to build a coaching business and to teach through this year while building my business. Those were my intentions. Come January, we got new leadership. The principal that I was working with in the fall retired. We got a new principal for the spring. Her leadership style was incredibly similar to that I had worked with at another school, and it was one that I wasn't interested in being with. And so that was when I knew. I was like, oh my God, I have to launch my coaching business now. So I'm not going back to school in August. And it was completely terrifying, but we had a couple weeks where stuff was just extra political bullshit at school. And so it got very easy for me to just resign. And I launched my business the next week. A couple weeks later, it was graduation. I cleaned out my classroom and I started taking clients the week after that. And so it was all very wham bam, thank you, ma'am. And completely terrifying. But I knew in my body that it was time to fly. And I just had to jump, and I had to. I found this safety in knowing that everything's going to be okay. Like, I was so certain. I was so certain that quitting teaching and launching my business would fully support me. And I don't have any words to explain it better than that. I knew that I would be divinely protected, supported, and guided through this whole process.
Yeah. And so I want to go back to the leadership part, because like I said, this is somewhat of a business podcast, but it's also career growth, professional growth, personal development, all those things formed into one. And I know that I've talked about on the podcast my bully boss experience. Like, what were you thinking? Like, what was there a final straw that like just pushed you over the edge and you were like, okay, I got to get out? Or was it that you have been thinking about this for so long and you're like, look, I'm tired of doing this. I want to go into my own thing and kind of control my own life?
Truthfully, leaving education, I had to grieve that, because I loved being in the classroom. I loved the kids. I was teacher of the year in 2020 to 2021. So I was damn good, like, at my job.
That's awesome.
And so leaving that was painful. With that being said, I spent 9 years at one school, and then this past school year was at a new school. So 1 year at a new place. And in those 9 years at the first school that I was at, I acquired different leadership roles. I was on different teacher leader teams, and like faculty supervisors to different student clubs and things like that. And that was when I became teacher of the year, all of that. Well, I was also teacher of the year when COVID hit, and being a leader through that, was like my own personal initiation. I don't know what the initiation was for, but it sucked. And I was in this space where I was on these different leadership teams, and I was a leader not just at my school anymore, but in the district. And I acquired too much knowledge. I knew too much about the inner workings of the school. I knew too much about the inner workings of the district. And I saw people making decisions that they didn't have to make, but they were making them from their egos. And this just infuriated me, because we're sold. A teacher is sold the idea you're doing this for the kids. And then when I bloomed into this leadership space and I saw all the leaders around me, they were making decisions for themselves or for politics, and none of it was for the kids. And so I had to turn into this advocate, not just for the children, the students, but for me and for my colleagues. And it was infuriating to be in that place, because I was like, all this time, I thought everybody here was in it for the kids, and now I see that some administrators are just in it for themselves, or in it for, we called it drinking the Kool-Aid that the district was pouring. And the district drank the Kool-Aid provided by the state. And it was all political, and it was all just this chessboard. And I am not into that. I am into being authentically me, and I will do and say what is best for the kids. And so I started getting chastised for that. I went and spoke at a board meeting. My principal said, "Why did you do that?" And I said, "Well, I had some things to say and you weren't listening." And he was upset about that. And so just leaders that lead with their ego is something that I don't really jive with. And so at this new school, this past school year, when our really great principal retired and this new one came in, she came in full of ego. And I was like, I've seen this movie before. I've read this book, and I'm not going to play this game again. I did make that decision because I called myself a beat down dog from education.
That's a good description.
But I felt so beat down from the 2020-2021 school year. I was so burnt out, and I was so I felt like a pile of nothingness from that school year, from burning at both ends, from trying to lead with my heart and do what was best for the kids and do what was best for me, and just meeting the red tape and running into walls. And so when I was presented with the opportunity to work with a leader that I knew her style, I was like, I opt out. I opt out of this. I'm not going to work with another person like this.
No, that makes sense, because that's very similar to like my bully boss experience. But then also, before, I used to work in the operating room as the low end of the totem pole operating room assistant. But I was trying to get into those leadership roles, or at least be seen as a leader in the organization. And we had committees, kind of like the things that you're talking about, maybe not as grand of the scale that you were in at that time. But I would bring in ideas that I really thought were beneficial, but it went against the norm of that organization. And I think also that it came from somebody at the lower end of the totem pole. Like, they just didn't want to listen. Now I know exactly what you're talking about, because I'm part of the leadership team at the company that I work for. And you do see the nitty gritty. You see the politics. Luckily, this company is really great that I work for. But like, it is hard to navigate that as a leader, to understand, like, all these things. You can't tell everybody these things. And then you got to navigate the politics to try to change it. And from the story that you told, what I really liked was you didn't just realize that you didn't like this leadership style, so you quit. You noticed that you didn't like it, and you tried to do something about it. And then when you realize that there's a lot of like walls to climb, you navigated yourself around it, where you can find joy or you can find happiness. At least that's how I interpreted it. So that's awesome. That's exactly what I did. I worked with a life coach myself at the beginning of this past school year, and working with her helped me enforce new boundaries, create new boundaries. And so I approached this past school year from a different place, and I focused on what I could do in my classroom, and I focused on how I could find joy and happiness myself in those four walls. And it was magnificent. It was a great school year. And I wasn't on the leadership teams, and I wasn't doing all those things. I really
took a couple steps back so I could focus on me. And it was great. And so, and I feel like, because now I work with women instead of children, I work with educators and I work with mothers, mainly like teachers and mothers are the only clients I've had thus far. And so I feel like I am addressing the problems of a system from a completely separate angle without any red tape from the state. I'm able to help the people that I have always been helping, who my heart has always been in it for, from just a completely different angle. And I feel good about it. I feel really confident in it. You know, every year the kids were coming to my classroom with more and more mental health struggles, and mental health is a passion of mine. And I could only teach them what the state gave me to teach them, and I could only support them within the parameters and the guidelines of what the state said I could do. And so now when I'm working with educators and with mothers, I am providing them with knowledge and embodiment practices to manage their own mental health, and then they are teaching their children, and those children are then teaching their friends. And so it is just this beautiful, it's just this beautiful overflow cascade of healing that I was not able to achieve in the classroom.
And that's awesome, because it ties into rooting for you and planting that seed, because the seed that you're planting is the clients that you work with, but sometimes the trees that grow from it is their offspring, their kids and the people around them. So that's beautiful connection there. But speaking of happiness, like on this podcast, is chasing success without sacrificing happiness. So I want to ask you the question, and this just pertains to you. You don't have to worry about society's answer or anything like that. But what does happiness mean to you personally?
To me, happiness is a belly laugh.
I know it's a hard question.
I love a good belly laugh. That when I am like just full of laughter, I know that I am happy. Also, finding fulfillment in just daily practices. Walking outside, smelling my rosemary makes me happy. And so just the teeniest, tiniest little things, divulging in the five senses in a way that makes you feel good. You know, watching the sunset, looking at a full moon, admiring the leaves that are falling off of the trees. These are all things that make me really happy.
Yeah. And the reason that I asked that question to the people that I have on this show is because it's different for everybody, right? Like, I don't know when the last time that I've gone out and smelled roses or rosemary or anything like that, but that's like what makes you, I will, but that's what makes you happy, right? Like for me, people think I'm crazy because work makes me happy. And so like, I work all the time. I'm a workaholic, but like, they don't see work as I see it. So I don't expect them to understand that this is why I'm happy, and it's really the building of things. So that's why I asked that question. And then the other question that I like to ask guests is, what does success mean to you?
Success to me, and this is so funny because a couple weeks ago, I had one of my clients redefine what success meant to her because she realized she was living off of the definition of success that her parents made and not her own.
Oh, yeah. That's important. Like, just to jump in, because like, I think for the longest time, that's what people do. And I think that's why it's so hard for people to find themselves, because they're living off of the expectations of what somebody else has told them. Jay Shetty, he always quotes this person, and I'll probably get it wrong, but he says, I'm not what I think I am. I'm not what you think I am. I am what I think you think I am. So like, I know you got to think about it. Yeah. But it's basically saying like, I'm what you think that I think you think I am. Yes. So it's like, it's basically, it's not my interpretation of who I am. It's not my interpretation of who I think you think I am. It's just, it blows my mind every time, because it's literally saying that we are the expectation that we set for ourselves that is presented by maybe like society or something like that.
Yeah. And to me, that quote just feels like the whole game of projection and mirroring.
Yeah.
Like we are what we see in other people, and what we admire in others we actually have in ourselves. That kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so success to me, I know that I'm successful in my business when I am connected with my clients, connected with my community, also connected with myself, sharing with ease, finding pleasure and fun in the marketing aspect, and making a difference. We talked about mothers teaching their children the things that I teach them. I had a client text me something that I taught her, and she shared it with her daughter. And when I read that text message, I was like, this is success. This is success to me. Just making that difference in such a magnificent way that lasts through generations, not just a 1 hour client call, but this is a lifetime for both my client and her daughter and whoever her daughter teaches. So that success to me is making a difference in such an impactful way through connection.
Yeah, and kind of tying that back to holistic, and I'm not an expert, but it feels like whenever you say that, the way that you feel is mind, body, and spirit. You feel it all because of that, what you're teaching. So you're still a teacher. I mean, yes, a coach, but like you're still teaching people. So it's not too much of a transition in that sense. So you're applying your skill of what you had for 10 years into what you're doing for your coaching, which I think is a differentiating factor for you, because there's a lot of coaches out there that don't take the time to learn these skills. And you kind of had a pre-run for 10 years without knowing that it would turn into this. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Speaking of success, or go ahead.
No, you can.
So speaking of success, one of the other questions that I like to talk about, which we kind of touched on with that quote, is what is a misconception of success that you've been told? Like, for instance, like the one that I always go to is like, you're successful when you get rich, but then you have to define rich and what does that actually mean? Because rich to Mark Cuban is different probably for rich to us, you know?
Right.
So what is kind of like a misconception that you've been told growing up that you found out that, you know, that's not actually what success is, and you wish that you could tell your younger self earlier?
I think I'm thinking about two things right now. One is compromising your own values and well-being for the sake of success. Doing what everybody else is doing because that's how they found success, and compromising your own values in that way, turning into a person that you're not. And then in compromising your well-being, I would say, you know, working yourself into the ground, not having strong boundaries with your work. And, you know, when I was growing up, the successful people that I knew, and I would consider my dad in this category, but also like his buddies. And so that those are the men that created the image of success for me. And oftentimes work was before family, and work was all hours of the night, and work was also on the weekends, and they were successful. So I thought that in order to be successful, you had to work through all hours of the night. You had to work on the weekends. You had to put work before your family. And that's, I'm trying to think of the word I'm looking for, but you know, when that's the image that is painted of success for children, then that creates children that grow into adults that then put work before family and work all hours of the night and just have those compromised morals, values, and wellness. Luckily, I was able to be like, I don't think that's it. Kind of like I did with Western medicine. I was like, I think there's got to be something different.
Yeah. When did you, because I'm assuming just from what you said that you started off working like this.
Yeah.
When did you find out that, like, hey, this isn't for me and this is not how success is made or gained?
It would have been that school year that I was teacher of the year, it would have been in the spring of 2021. I mean, I was staying up so late making lesson plans. I threw a community event, and I was on all the different leadership teams that took time and preparation too. And so I was working all the time, and I was successful. I was incredibly successful, but I was miserable. And so it was in this probably spring of 2021 that I was like, what good is this success if I hate it? There's no good in that. And so I started on I remember the first meeting I told somebody, that's a really good idea, but I don't have the space and capacity to do that. Maybe somebody else can. We were on Zoom. Everybody on the Zoom call looked at me like I had 10 heads. They were like, who is this person saying no and telling somebody else to do it? Because they had never heard me say that before. Because I was the go-getter. I was like, all right, yeah, I can do that. Because I knew I could, but it was always at the expense of myself. And so it was in that time that I'm not going to do anything for anybody else that is at the expense of myself. I say no from here on out.
And that goes back to what you were saying before. One of the trends that I've heard you talk about is boundaries and setting boundaries. And so, like, a lot of people in some cases don't feel like they can say no because, like, if they are chasing success, to tie it back to the podcast, is like they feel like they can't say no because that might be a missed opportunity that could take them to the next level.
Yeah.
But in reality, if you stretch yourself so thin, work-wise, and then it affects your well-being and your motivation and your ability to do all these things, you're actually harming yourself by saying yes to all these things. So I wanted to circle back around and say, whenever you're talking about boundaries, how do you help create boundaries for yourself, or how do you help your clients create those boundaries? And what are some of the pushbacks that you get from your clients?
And you know, this is a learning experience for me too. I mean, every day I see where I could stand to have stronger boundaries. And so I don't feel like it's something that I had a therapy appointment yesterday, and I told her I don't feel like I'm an impenetrable force yet. But that is where I would like to be. And so I don't even know if that's attainable, but it's what I'm aiming for. But yeah, the word boundaries, when you say it to people who have none, they're like, what the fuck is that?
They laugh.
Yeah. And I mean, I used to, in those partying days, I remember people being like, Kasey, you have no boundaries. And I was like, yeah, I'm free as a bird. And
exactly. That is a misconception. They think that no boundaries mean free, but it actually means the opposite.
It means the exact opposite. And so that's just, I was uneducated in it. I thought that I was free by not having boundaries, but now that I have them, I realize I am actually now free. And I was not then. But just, so in my client sessions, I ask them to think about who in your life takes your energy from you. This could be someone that always needs something. This could be someone that when they ask you a question, you jump to answer the phone. The person that you would never just let it continue ringing, or you would never let their text message go unread until you have the capacity to answer. Who is the person that sucks your energy right out of you? And they're able to easily recall. I mean, it's within seconds they list off about 5 people.
I had a couple of names pop up.
And those are the people that need boundaries. Those are also the people that are really going to be uncomfortable when you start setting them, because they've had free access to you the whole time you've had a relationship with them. And so when you take that access away, they're like, what's wrong with you? Nothing's wrong with me. I just want to be able, I love you more when you're not sucking my energy out of me. And I'm able to offer you more whenever I can better manage my own energy and come to you from a grounded space. And so boundaries can be verbal. It can be, I actually don't have the capacity to handle this right now. Can I get back with you tomorrow? or I don't have time this week, but what do you think about next week? So it could be something as simple as that. Also, the word no is a complete boundary. No, that's a boundary. And I've found just with myself and with my clients, the word no is one of the hardest ones, one of the hardest boundaries to set. A boundary could also be one that I have with myself is I do not check my phone from 9:30 to 7:30. I'm not on my phone 9:30 to 7:30. That helps me wind down. It helps me wake up from a grounded state. This is a boundary for myself, but there are also people in my life that are used to having 24/7 access to me. And so they had to learn that I'm not going to answer their text messages or their phone calls from this time. If the world is burning, I'll figure it out at 7:31.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's just, it's a boundary that I now have. And so just learning who are the people that take your energy away from you and how can we create these boundaries between us and them to better protect ourselves. I have a person who texted me with an emergency at 6:30 in the morning a couple weeks ago. And, I don't answer my phone until 7:31. And so they had to figure it out for an hour and they were frustrated with me, but I was able to do my morning routine and then to assess their situation with them from a grounded state. So I provided better advice because I was better.
Yeah.
If I would have answered right then at 6:30, I was fresh from waking up and I would have been grouchy and I probably would have given a little bit of attitude of, I don't text before this time. Why are you texting me right now? So, it's not just for me, it's for the person that the boundary is placed with as well.
Yeah. And just speaking on that phone piece, because I do the same thing. I have a do not disturb that automatically comes on at I think 9 o'clock, and then it doesn't come off of it until 8 o'clock. And my friends know because they see it on the iPhone where it's like Zach has do not disturb, and so they make a little bit of fun on it. But it's true. The studies behind that is one, like if you're waking up and you're checking your phone right away, specifically social media and that kind of stuff, you're not actually waking up and going through the world with your own thoughts. You're taking the thoughts and from what you're seeing and experiencing through the screen, and then that navigates how you go through your day. So whenever you're speaking about a morning routine, that's probably one of the things that's been most beneficial to me too, because I wake up, I work out, I read, and then I like shower, get ready, all that kind of stuff. And then I start my day for work. And then that's when I'll check the phone or the computer and that kind of stuff. And it is grounding because you can start having your own thoughts. You have less decision fatigue throughout the day, all that kind of stuff. And then going back to the boundaries piece is whenever you say that, because like you said, your client's hardest word to say is no. But once you say that once and you don't see the world crumbling around you, it's like, it's liberating, right? Yeah. Because I had to do that with my friends. Like you were saying, like, our mutual friend Carlos would text me and be like, let's go. And like, he would be talking about like partying or going to the club and all that kind of stuff. But like, I started having to say no because I realized my vision and my goal for myself and then also my business now. And that's what motivates me. So I'm very passionate on people having personal visions and especially companies having personal visions. And I think that's what you're kind of doing for your clients is helping them understand what their vision is. And just for people listening, like the vision is the end goal. Like you're trying to accomplish this. So you're not going to achieve it in one day or possibly even 8 weeks, but it gives you that direction for what you're trying to accomplish. And it helps you set those boundaries a little bit easier because if your North Star is here and then you see something over here, what you call the weeds, you can say no, or you, in your opinion, or in your metaphor, you're pulling the weeds and physically like removing them. Correct me if I got that wrong.
No, but, that's right. And I love that you're talking about vision because that is what we're doing in my client sessions. We are creating their vision. I use a little bit different vocabulary. We talk about new story and old story. And so we'll run through just a situation that my clients are going through, something that's triggering to them, frustrating to them. And we'll talk about the thoughts and the habits and then what manifests. You know, anything that manifests is something that's come to fruition from what you have done. And and so we talk about that. That's your story. And so the old story is maybe your boss talks down to you, you get home and you open one beer, and then the one beer turns to a case, and then you get a little hammered, and then the next morning you wake up with a hangover, and then the whole next day at work you have a headache and you feel like shit, and then your boss is coming at you again, and now you don't feel good about it. And so that's an old story. Same old story.
Yeah.
You know it. What is the new story? What would you like to do? And a new story would be my boss is hammering me about something, but I tell him, you know, actually I feel really confident about what I said or did, and sorry for frustrating you, but I feel good about it. And you're able to go home and you shook it off. Maybe you have new habits in place. You now, instead of drinking, you garden or you go for a run. So you do that. And so you have regulated and you've worked through that frustration and that anger. And then you have a relaxing day or a relaxing evening. You go to bed on time. You wake up on time. You kill it the next day at work. And your boss is like, oh, okay, maybe they do know what they're talking about. So you see, there is old story and there is new story habits. And when my clients are working with me, their new story is so fresh and new. They're doing habits that they've never done before. And so, of course, you fall back and you make mistakes. But whenever they're texting me, because they have the opportunity to text me throughout the week if there's any celebrations or struggles. But if they text me like, oh, I landed at the bar. Okay, well, what do you want to do? I want to leave. Okay, why haven't you left yet? All my friends are here. Okay. Do you want to tell your friends that you're leaving? Yes. Okay. Why haven't you done it yet? Okay. I'm doing it now. And so it's just like a little bit of triage. And then whenever they get out and they leave and we talk about, okay, well, what are some new story habits that we can do right now? You want to go home? You want to take a shower, splash some cold water on your face, journal through what landed you at the bar. What hard feelings are you going through right now that landed you there? And they are able to correct a situation in the moment because they have that vision. They know that there is no space in their future for landing at the bar and getting shit-faced anymore. They know that there's no space for that. And when they have that vision and they're able to stick to it and see, okay, well, I want to do new story habits right now. I'm tired of the old story habits. They're able to follow through with it.
Yeah, that's awesome because you're giving people a tool and you're guiding them through that tool to overcome the challenges that they had. And going back to tiny habits, because it's fresh on my mind, is one of the prompts. Like you gave a perfect example with if your boss is being rude or hammering you on something, you can actually take that prompt and change the behavior that comes after it. And you can actually have fun with it too. So like, if your boss comes at you and they say something that just like infuriates you, you have to practice this just like exercising a muscle. But like once it gets to a certain point, you can say, you kind of put like a funny behavior into it. Like whenever my boss does this, I'm going to clap for him or something, you know, it's some weird things, but like you can take that prompt, you enter the new behavior, and then it almost makes it fun. The example that they give in the book is it's like a couple that split up, but they have a kid, and then the husband is always like snarky. So the wife always, or the mom always does something. I can't remember. This is a bad example because I can't remember. But she ended up tweaking the way that she reacted, and then their relationship became stronger because of it. So it's pretty cool. I know that this is a long episode, but is there anything that you haven't talked about that you want to bring up at this point?
I don't think so, but I have an example that goes with what you were just saying. And it's fresh on my mind because I talked about it with my girlfriends this past weekend. Eye rolling, when somebody rolls their eyes at you.
Yeah.
And so this could be in the workplace, this could be at home, this could be with your spouse, this could be with your kids. When somebody rolls their eyes at you, you know, you are faced with the choice of how to respond to that. And so my girlfriends were sharing, like, when their husbands roll their eyes at them, they get furious. And, like, they're like, who the fuck are you rolling your eyes at, sir? And I told them, I was like, no, listen. I was like, y'all, when people roll their eyes at me now, I laugh. I was like, I laugh hysterically. And they were like, Kasey, I don't understand. How? And I was like, because I know if I have said something to cause someone else to roll their eyes at me, that means they know I'm right. And their eye roll is a physical recognition that I am right in a time that they don't want me to be right. And that is funny to me. And I laugh. And it was like everyone in the room, they were like, oh my gosh, that's so true. When he rolls his eyes at me, it is because I'm right. And I'm like, just try laughing, girls. Just try laughing and see what happens. And
you take the power away.
Yes, you take all the power and the anger and the frustration out of it. And you pull it back to you. Like, I do have the power because I'm right now. And you're pissed about it. And that's hilarious to me. And so you're just reframing someone's action that would historically be triggering to you. You are no longer giving them your power. You're actually taking all the power yourself.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I think we can end on that.
Okay.
But before we wrap up fully, where can people find you and how can they get in touch with you if they want to partake in your program?
Okay, so I do a lot on Instagram. If you want to look me up on Instagram, I am at Kasey, Kasey __T. I also have a website. It is KaseyTench.com. And I'm also on LinkedIn. And I think it's Kasey T on there too. But you can find me on any of the above mentioned, and my other accounts are tagged on each of those as well. If you listen to anything and you really liked it today, message me. I love a good conversation. And so I'm down to talk about anything that you heard and have more questions about.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here. I absolutely enjoyed this conversation. But yeah, we'll go ahead and cue the outro.
Okay, thank you for having me, Zach.